this on my team. If you talking and talk to me nice, I play with all of my life. You see my name in the lights, better get right, I'm champion. The game is in trouble, I've been in my depth for the piece of the puzzle, I got it for real.
But anywho, so let's get started here, dude. Like, obviously I know who you are. I know most of your accolades, probably not in detail. PIAA state champ.
Yep.
4th place, right, at nationals, All-American.
1993.
Head coach of Rider University.
Yep.
And I know you had international stuff. What am I missing here? Just throw some stuff in that I'm not talking about or that I don't know in detail. And don't be shy. Don't hold back.
I did win a Midlands championship at one point, and that was post-grad. 6 months after graduation, I won Midlands, and placed a couple times at the U.S. Open, 7th. But I wrestled some massive beasts out there, like your boy Kurt Angle from Clarion. I wrestled McCoy a bunch of times. Mark Kerr from Syracuse, who was just a stud. The guy from Oklahoma that was in the UFC for a while. I forget his name, but he just picked me up and spun me on his finger and threw me around and stuff.
Now, what weight?
I wrestled Chade, and I wrestled somebody else too that was just beasts.
Oklahoma, Dan Chade.
Yeah.
What weight? What weight did you wrestle Angle?
220. Because the reason I went 220 is because you remember the assistant coach we had that was in Dan Mayo.
Yeah.
He was 198 and he was number 2 on the ladder, and I couldn't touch him.
Okay.
Back then. He was so good.
I was telling my son, I'm like, I swear Johnny wrestled Kurt Angle, but I said, I go mathematically, I just couldn't remember.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I go, there had to be a reason. I know he wasn't that size. And I'm like, maybe there was somebody that I couldn't think of that was just a monster at 98. I was thinking, and maybe that was your best shot at 220.
I wrestled him in the finals of the New York AC tournament one time, my assistant coach, and he politely tech-falled me 10-0 very quickly. Like, didn't even break a sweat.
He did. You're going to laugh, by the way. I took Maddox down to the NCAAs down in Philly.
Yep.
And and I was sick. I had walking pneumonia, but it was so close. I'm like, I gotta take Maddox down there to see it. I wanted to take my whole family. But I forget what the situation was, but I took Maddox down on the Friday morning session. And my buddy, you remember Pat Sheridan? Do you remember that name? Yeah. So my buddy, Pat Sheridan, I'm like, hey, are you going to be going down to nationals, blah, blah, blah. And everybody's asking me, am I going to go to nationals? Do I want a full set of tickets? And they were like, dude, ridiculous. Like the numbers I was given. I'm like, dude, I don't want to spend $2,000.
That's what it would have cost you.
As much as I want to go,
Yep.
Just the numbers. I just was like, so I call Pat and he gets me hooked up with a freaking suite for free.
Oh, wow.
For me and Maddox.
That's huge.
And guess who's in my suite?
Kurt.
Dan Mayo.
Dan. That's a small world right there.
So I'm like, hey, man, you were like a grad assistant at Ryder. And I said, you coached, my buddy.
Yep.
John. He's like, oh my God, dude, I got to tell you, you look like a monster compared to him. He was
so much bigger back then, John. You're right. He's
was there drug testing back then?
No. If you remember
I'm teasing. I'm teasing. I'm teasing.
He actually wrestled 177 his entire career in college, but he was so big. And
dude,
he got into running post competition, and he runs all the time. So,
but even height wise, he just does not.
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
John, the first time I took him down in one of our workouts, it took me over a year. He was so hard to score on. I couldn't stop smiling from ear to ear, and it kept getting my ass kicked because I couldn't stop smiling. I was so proud of myself at the moment. You know what I mean? But he was so good. He got me really good on my feet because you remember I wasn't great on my feet at all. I was more of a mat wrestler.
Cradle.
When he came in, he got me really good on my feet, and that made the difference of me being an All-American. So,
yeah, that's awesome. And Coach Taylor probably went out and sought that guy to get in and to work with you because you
He
didn't have
did.
anybody, no disrespect to anybody in the room, but nobody that had that level of ability. And when you train with someone that's that good, you can't help but get good. When your toughest
Agreed.
guy
And
is in your room.
yeah. And I didn't have him till I redshirted after my junior year. And then that's when I ran into Dan and we worked out once or twice. And then him and Gary built a relationship and he wanted to help me. But then he stuck around for quite a bit afterwards. And then we had a pretty good run as a team too, because he stayed till at least 97, 98. And we were ranked 7th in the country, our dual meet team in the 97 season.
Wow.
And he was a good coach. He really was.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. But it was funny. He was in my suite and I was like,
That's
hey,
unbelievable.
I'm like, you coach my buddy. I remember. But hey,
he taught me a lot. He taught me a lot about training for sure.
Yeah. So obviously your dad being a huge part of you getting into wrestling and your career, I kind of know your backstory, but for the people that are going to watch a podcast and listen to it, what's your early memories and how did it all start?
Definitely started with my dad. He wrestled in high school, and then he was part of the. I think it was him and Mr. Hunts were part of the coaching staff when we were for the Quakertown Youth Club, and I hated it at first, John. I remember my very first match. It was at Milford Gym, and it was a QIC dual meet of some sort. I was crying on his lap. I'll never forget it. He sent me out there. I just grabbed the kid. I threw him down, pinned him. I walked off crying. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. That was one of my first memories of wrestling, And then I fell in love with it as I grew older. And I think I had success early because I was big and I didn't have a lot of kids in my weight classes at the time. So I didn't have to wrestle a million matches a weekend like you had to, you know what I mean, when you were younger. But I was heavier and I was bigger and there was maybe one or two kids. So I was having success by accident almost. And
Sure.
then for some reason, he was my coach for my first, 6, 7 years, 8 years or something like that.
Yeah.
And there were times I just, it's your dad. You just want to kill him for God's sakes at practice. Cause he's talking to you like a son and he's getting on your ass because he's just your dad, and he's not, you don't feel like he's doing it to other guys on the team, blah, 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 blah. But
he did do it to other guys, by the way.
He did do it to other guys. He was equally mean to everybody. Yes, you included 100%. Yeah, no. And it was, when I look back, I wouldn't change it for the world because then we had, junior high where our two schools split with Milford and Strayer. And I kind of floated along then. I wasn't really good.
Who was your middle school coach? Do you remember?
Shoot, I forget who it was at Milford. Do you remember who it was when you were there?
You were at Milford?
Yeah. First 2 years.
I thought you were at Strayer for some reason.
My 9th grade year, I was at Strayer.
Okay. So Anderson.
Yes.
And then Krothummel.
Yes.
John Krothummel came in.
Yep. And then my 9th grade year was Steve Curley, who was a football coach by nature, who was the Strayer coach.
Yeah.
When I moved into town.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the funny story. One of my best friends through high school and still, talk to him today, Tom Wilson. You remember him? He was on our team, right? He was like a 32, 38 pounder, and behind you and Jamie. And we wrestled in the Bucksmont League finals in 9th grade. I was at Strayer. He was at Milford. He killed me in the dual meet. I killed him in the tournament, and that was like an eye-opening experience for me. You know what I mean? And it was just like
that was like a turning point.
I might be okay at this thing. Yeah. Of course, he stayed the same weight. It was like 128 or something like that. And I grew like to 155 the next year. So
that's funny.
I knew I wasn't going to stay small long. So
yeah.
But it was neat. It was definitely a growing experience, and you remember me. You were 88-5 for God's sakes in high school, which is unheard of in my brain. I can't even.
There's a lot of guys that were a lot better. Like, you know, I just actually had a podcast with Teague Moore, and we were talking about his brother Ty Moore, who was like 146-1. You know, and then we had Chris Kortnick 140. And I know you always bring up 88-5. I'm like, dude, I'm like way down on the totem pole when you look at the Pennsylvania greatness, right?
But from our perspective at Quakertown, that's one of the best ever, if not the best ever, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, John,
it's cool.
I had 74 total wins, and I had 35 of them my senior year. That's all of a sudden it was like, oh, click. I took off, you know?
Yeah.
Where you were much better the entire time than I was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was a little nutty. But you could say obsessed. But I remember, I distinctly remember, well, actually 2 stories. One story about your dad, I'll just jump in here real quick, is, and I told this at the Quakertown banquet, because I give out an award.
Nice.
For in memory of my mom and dad.
That's awesome.
And one of the stories I told was, you know, remember youth, they had and Walter Kenyon, that was a guy who started it with your dad.
That was the
Walter
OW
Kenyon.
award for us.
Yeah. So I remember the first year, you remember there was an A team, B team, and a C team.
Yep.
Right. And so I think I was on the B team. I wasn't on the A team. I was on the B team. And we went down and we wrestled Warrington AA.
Oh, I know this story.
And they were like, you know, they had their like singlets. They were blue. It was almost like North Penn, dark blue, light blue.
Yep.
They were like Cobra Kai in Karate Kid.
That's a great analogy.
Right?
Great analogy.
Am I right? And
You're
we were like Miyagi knows karate in our sneakers, not wrestling shoes.
100%.
Sneakers, shorts, and we didn't even have a uniform.
Sharing sneakers and stuff.
Smoked us.
Yeah.
I can't even remember. It was a lot to like 0. Who knows? We may even had a -1.
We may have lost a point somewhere.
Right. Your dad may have like barked at something. But anyway, I remember being named captain the following week of that match because I made it all the way to the 3rd period before I got everybody got pinned like in the 1st period. It was like the lambs to the lions.
It was.
And I made it all the way to the 3rd period before I got pinned. And that's how I got to be captain of the week. And I was proud. I was like, hey, man,
absolutely. You should have been
proud. I made it to the 3rd.
That's a great story. But then we turned around and beat him a couple years later, if not the next year.
No. So that was our first year.
Oh, that's right.
And you were younger, but your dad brought you in. So you probably started when you were probably 5 years old, is my guess.
I was 4 when I started.
Boom. That's that. Yeah. Cause I was 6.
Yeah, I was 4.
And even though I think you were young for your grade. And so, yeah, you probably would have been 4, but you were a bigger kid. But anyway, so no, that was our first year. And then by the time I was in 6th grade, that was my last year of youth. That's when we beat them.
That's insane.
So very first year of our youth program, we got crushed.
Demoralized.
Didn't have singlets.
Yeah.
And then we got those ugly singlets.
Awful with the leotards, including the leotards.
I have no idea how they chose. It must have been one of those nights, Johnny. That's all I got to say. They looked and said, this is a great idea.
Let's get them.
The lights were dark. Fact. That's all I got to say. And they couldn't see the catalog.
That is a fact. 100%. They were looking at the wrong catalog for all.
Yeah. But no, my 6th grade year, we beat them. And then, so after I won states, I came in and I could take you down, dude.
All day.
Like all day.
Mm-hmm. Now,
and I remember
you won the states at what? 132?
Yep.
I was 165 minimum then. So I had a weight advantage.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter.
even if I was 155, I had a distinct weight advantage on you, and you still took me down at will.
So I remember going into practice and I shot like normal, like come in, boom, hit. And I'm like, hey, wait a second. I actually have to, I actually have to fight. Like, I don't know if the testosterone kicked in or what happened, but I remember it was either me and Ritter, me and somebody. I think I left that practice and I actually drove to either Drouse or Evans's house and knocked on their door and went in. And I said, listen, Hangey can win a state title. And they're
That's
just
great.
like looking at me
Yeah, because I
like,
didn't make it out of districts that year.
you didn't make it out of districts. But dude, I got in my car and I drove and I'm like, I'm telling you, you work with him, he can win a state title.
That's pretty impressive. I did not know that story, John.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
No, I
awesome.
was that impressed with how much because again, like when you can go in and you can like a, you know, when you can have your way, you like, hey, I can take
Absolutely.
this dude down. I can do this. You know how it is,
Yep. Yep.
like same in college. Like, hey, I can take this guy down. And then when you feel like they turn that corner and I remember that. I remember when it was like something kicked in. And I think part of it was your testosterone kicked in.
I
And you were
finally
like,
matured and developed a little bit.
yeah. And I was just like, man, I had to fight I got the takedown, but I had to fight for that takedown. And
That's
I had to
awesome.
fight hard. It wasn't like just putting a little effort. It was like I had to use all my gusto. And here I'm coming off a state title.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he made me fight for that freaking take. I'm like, that dude, he can do it. And
I
what
appreciate
happened?
that. It
What
definitely
happened?
did. It
You did
definitely
it.
happened. I still can't believe it happened. I mean, it's just because, go from not making it out of districts to winning everything the next postseason just blows my mind still.
Well, there's not many, if any. I can't even think of someone who did it. To be honest with you, so what you did was freaking awesome, man.
It's like
It
you
was,
said, John. It was just like there was a click, emotionally, physically, and it just all of a sudden, the sport slowed down a little bit for me, and I got strong enough to handle my own against my opponents. You know what I mean? So I was able to, because I was okay at wrestling. I just wasn't strong enough to perform some of the things at times.
yeah,
And then it just, I remember going to Roney's camp over the summer. It was a day camp up in Northampton. And I
yep,
was working with him, and he said the same thing. He goes, "You can win a state championship this year." I go, "Wait a second. I don't even know how to spell state championship. I didn't make it out of districts, for God's sakes." And he's like, "Well, you got to start thinking that way." And I remember you telling me the same thing. You got to
yeah,
start thinking that way, because if you don't, then you're gonna relive your belief.
yeah,
So it was really your influence for sure, and a little bit of Don Rohn's, obviously, and Coach Strauss and Coach Evans,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
cultivating me day in and day out. But it was that wake up moment that really helped.
Well, when other people believe in you, and then you start going, "Hey, wait, Hal said this,
Yeah,
Roan said this,"
and they know what they're talking about.
and they're not, you start all of a sudden you're like, I can do that. And then you start wrestling. And you wrestled Chris Kortnick, right? Your senior year?
My senior year, he moved up from 67 to 85 and beat me like
Was it a dual
9 to
meet?
1. It was a
Was
dual meet at our place,
okay.
and he beat me like 9 to 1. He was so stinking strong, John. I couldn't move him.
I wrestled him in ninth grade and he was in seventh and he was stinking strong. I was like,
Yeah,
how is a seventh grade kid this strong?
he's so strong.
And I tied him and I broke his nose. Not intentionally,
Right.
you know. Um, and then he beat me in the junior high championship. So I
Really?
tied him in the duel and then we wrestled again. And I got more fanfare, Johnny, that I like every match after that, kids were coming up to me. I became almost
You
like a
beat,
mini legend.
yeah,
They're like,
because you beat Chris
you're
Kortnick.
the guy. No, I didn't beat him. I
Oh, you
tied him.
tied him. Unbelievable. That's
And I was
insane.
angry that I tied him.
Right.
But it was like I think it was like a 4-4 match. And after every match, I'd have these kids come up. Are you the guy that tied Chris
That's
Kortnick?
awesome. That's awesome.
It's funny.
Isn't
It's
it
just
neat
funny.
that, like, you look down the road 3 to 4 years and you're both state champs at different weights then
Oh
later down
yeah.
the road. Isn't that
He
crazy?
he grew, I didn't.
Yeah.
He
What
grew,
weight
I
was that
didn't.
at, John? Do you know? Do you remember what weight roughly that was at?
So if I was in ninth grade, it was probably 121.
Okay. Yeah, he
He
shot
was
up
in
then.
seventh.
Yeah.
He was in seventh.
Wow.
And yeah, he was. I always say, like, when people talk about who is the best Pennsylvania wrestler, Kerry Colott obviously comes. There's a bunch of guys that come up,
Absolutely.
and it's always tough, in my opinion, to like compare, like, especially today's kid, because
Yeah,
the style, the technique. I mean, it's fun to watch. I got to
it
tell you,
is.
when it's a really good back and forth, like almost
Yep.
like two cats fighting with the funk and all that other stuff.
It is.
Um, but Chris Kortnick at that size as a freshman
Yep.
lost first round at states and then never lost again.
Now, when he was a freshman, he wasn't allowed to wrestle back that year, correct? And I think they
That
changed.
was me either. That was the last year.
That's right, because your junior year was the same way, correct?
That's his freshman year.
So isn't that you guys changed the rule because you guys
I don't
probably would
know
have
about
taken
that.
third. But you guys probably would have had a really good chance of taking third in your weight classes. 100%.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, any chance you have in the wrestlebacks, you know what I mean? Like, depending
absolutely.
where your head's at,
Yep.
if you're not like down in the dumps that you don't have a shot at the state title, which happens. Like
100%.
guys in nationals, like, oh, I don't have a shot at the national title. And it's easy to just fold up and
Yep.
walk, like, hey, I had enough. If I'm not going to win a title, I'm out. And that's when I coached high school. There was a lot of times guys would drop down. I'm like, bro, I go, send him home. I go,
Yeah.
he wants to go home. Give him a
reason.
reason.
Yep.
Give him a reason.
Give him a reason.
And I'm sure you guys do the
It
same
won't
stuff.
take much to convince him. One little dog fight in a scramble, and he'll be like, all right, you can have it.
And it doesn't go the way they want it,
Yep.
or they fall
Yep.
behind early, and it's like you just keep pounding,
Yep. And they just like, all right, you can have it, buddy. I'm done.
Yeah.
It's so true. Happens a lot. Happens all the time.
Quick question. So what schools, just out of curiosity, obviously we know where you ended up, at Ryder. What were you considering any other school, or how many other schools were you considering after you won?
Stroudsburg, because a lot of my high school buddies went there.
Oh,
Not
that's
to wrestle,
right.
and Stroudsburg was Division I back then. I actually committed. Then
you committed to Stroudsburg.
Yeah, because again, a lot of my buddies were going there, and I just wanted to kind of tag along. And if you could have seen the two head coaches visit my house, the Ryder head coach Gary Taylor and Bob Dolling, the Stroudsburg head coach, and the two distinct comparisons day and night between those two coaches, and the argument my dad and I had in the top, we had a little Cape Cod on Main Street.
Yep.
Gary Taylor's in the house, and we're upstairs in my bedroom in the Cape Cod. He's saying, "You're going to Ryder." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm going to East Stroudsburg."
So Gary's in the house.
Gary's downstairs in the kitchen, and he can hear this display of conversation, and back and forth. 5 minutes, 10 minutes later, we come downstairs. I go, "Coach Taylor, I'm coming to Ryder."
What? So what was it convincing?
My dad just said, "There's no comparison between the two human beings that visited this house. The quality of human being that Gary Taylor was, the quality of human being. It wasn't that Dolling was a bad person, or just the presentation of character in my dad's eyes. It's really what it was. He was just looking at it from his perspective on what's best for his son."
And I don't even know the guy you're talking about, to be honest with you. So I couldn't even.
He was the coach when Kubo was there and all those guys, and and DG Acomo, DG Aquino or something was the big assistant coach back then. But it was just the way Gary presented himself, the passion he had for the program, obviously, and the emphasis he put on me as a student athlete was something my dad listened to that I vaguely remember, because I wasn't paying attention. I was thinking about my buddies and wrestling and this and that.
You're going to Stroudsburg.
I'm going to Stroudsburg. Yeah. Now, I also got recruited by Coach Poff when he was at Bloomsburg before he went to Lock Haven.
Yeah.
and I think a little bit of Lock Haven. But you got to remember, I didn't make it out of districts till my senior year, and then I had a fairy tale ride to a state title, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But you have to think in the back of my head, am I really good enough to go to those schools and be that? Because Bloomsburg was really good back then.
Yeah. I was thinking about going there, actually.
Yeah, they're actually a really good program back there. So was Sanders the coach at that time, I think?
Yep.
Roger Sanders.
Yep. And
who Bonomos were there. And
Coach Pop
was this. Yeah. So
assistant.
It was a great program, but I didn't think I was good enough, to be honest with you. But I felt after I committed to Ryder, it was obviously the best decision I've ever made. And it was just, it literally came down to my dad's perception of the two coaches in my house visit. And I had committed, and then they did a post visit to my commitment. And that's when the argument happened, and I changed my commit. So
that's funny.
That's funny. It was really good. And then on my official visit, Fasty's at Ryder, Stewart's at Ryder, Bing's at Ryder, Crognell's at Ryder. We grew up wrestling all those guys.
Yeah.
In our league and stuff like that. And I'm like, hey, I know all you guys, and then I met Adam there, who became one of my best friends, and we live 10 minutes from each other right now. So it's like just a small world, but it was like became very familiar very quick. And that was really, I think, what really helped.
And if you knew then what you know now, you may not have gone to Ryder.
You're right. You're right.
I'm just busting on all those guys.
Yeah. If I knew I was going to be teammates with those guys, I may have changed my mind real quick. But I remember going into Ryder as a freshman, and we had Dissolve, we had Mike Lehman, we had Scarpa, we had Fasty, all these senior guys. John, I didn't score a point for like a month and a half. And I was wait a second, I'm a PA state champ. What the hell?
Yeah.
And they just kept kicking the dirt out of me. And I was like, man, oh man.
Yeah.
But it seemed to work out pretty good. So
wow. It obviously worked out great for you.
Yeah.
I mean, Taylor was a great guy, and there's not a better person to take over the program than
thank you for that. I appreciate that. And he was a mentor for me in a lot of areas of not just wrestling, but life in general. He was like a second dad to me. And and it was, I'm very happy that he was part of my life. He was like personality wise, you can attest to this. Him and Coach Evans were very similar.
Oh yeah.
Very docile in their approach, but very fair, but very demanding in their own way, and really brought the best out in their kids and their athletes.
Yeah.
And for me to go from them, from Evans to Taylor was the right match for me.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. On the coaching topic, how many years do you see yourself coaching? Is there a number, or
there's
not
even
even
minimum?
What's that?
There's definitely a minimum.
Okay.
I'm going 4 more for sure.
Okay.
Because that's how long my son's going to be there.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'm going through JP's career, which he's a redshirt freshman this year.
So so he's got 4. No, he'd have 5 more, right? Or no, 4 more. 4 more. I'm sorry. Yeah, 4 more. Yep.
So these next 4 years is probably going to age me dramatically, being a father and a coach at the same time.
Hey, good luck, man.
Yeah, exactly. But our relationship has done wonderful. We've grown leaps and bounds since he's gotten to Ryder in a good way, and I think that's good.
That's awesome. How's he doing?
He's doing really well. He's learning a lot by, trial by error, by fire, all that stuff. And
sure.
He's just, look, when I was I hit that spurt my senior year in high school. It's coming. It hasn't hit it yet. He's a late bloomer, even later than I was.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's 6'4" and he wrestled 174 pounds this year. So he's skinny as a rail.
6'4". Holy crap. He is.
Yeah.
I remember he is tall, but
and his wrestling
that's
IQ
a big
is
frame.
Yeah, it is. And his shoulders are broad. He really has to lift and get stronger. And if that happens, then I see success on his future. But
is he putting his time in the weight room?
Yep. That's all he's doing right now.
Purposeful lifting.
Yeah. He's up to about 194 94, 95 right now. So he's growing, and when a kid starts to see that, what it's like. All they want to do is be in the weight room. All they want to do is keep getting stronger, all that stuff. So that's where he's
what
at
do you
right now.
see him as next year? 84?
I hope so. I think 74 is too much for him. I think 84, I want him to get to 205 before he even goes down there. So
Yeah.
just for sheer
I was
horsepower.
going to say, man, for that size down at 7, man, that's got to be
yeah.
It can't
tough.
be. I mean, he's a fit, thin kid to begin with. You know what I mean?
So he's doing well. Grade-wise, he's doing well. The kids, he's really good friends with the kids on the team. So I couldn't ask for a better scenario for him. He's
awesome.
His situation's good. So he's got 4 years left. So I'm staying as long as they'll keep me there, which they ain't getting rid of me.
Yep.
They have me for 4 more, and then beyond that, we'll see.
Year by year, right?
Yeah, because that'll be 12 years as the head coach for me. And that'll be basically 30 years total at Ryder since 2000 once he's done.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a long time. It's
been a grind, right?
It had, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Like, I love every second of it. The kids that I've got to coach, the kids I was teammates with, from 88 to 93, and just the success stories that you get to be a part of, like Doug Umbauer, TJ Morrison, who wasn't an All-American, but was one of my favorite people to coach in the history of the program. Chad Walsh, Ryan Wolf, Quinn Kinner, Sammy Alvarez, Ethan Laird, Jesse Delvecchia, you name it. Dean Sherry, guys who weren't All-Americans, Gino Fleury. You just see them go from A to Z, and it's just so rewarding. It really is.
It's priceless.
It is. Even Mike Wilson this year, who was a 2-time national qualifier for us, literally placed 1 time in the state of New Jersey. He took 7th, and he's a 2-time national qualifier for us and made the conference. He was in the semifinals this year and in the finals last year. And that just tells me that we're doing the right things.
Yep. When you have that kind of an impact on a kid's life, you can't put a dollar on it. You 100%. Know what I mean? It's and you've done an amazing job at Ryder. And that kind of takes us into our next topic, which I want to get your perspective as a former wrestler, right? But then also as a coach of a smaller program.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the nature of NIL in wrestling, in college athletics. Like, what's your and it's 2 different perspectives, right?
Sure.
Because you obviously have a bias as a smaller program, right? And you'd have a bias if you were in a bigger program. And I don't think those biases are going to, level up at the same, right?
Right.
So you as a former wrestler, just dealing with scholarship, right? The old NCAA way of doing things. And, but your thoughts?
I'd like to think, now I don't have the answer to this because I would never face this scenario, and you can't fault the kids. That's the first thing that you can't do. You can't fault the kids. If somebody comes by and throws a bag of money at them, they're jumping on it. Okay. Now, John, I was in a round of 12 as a sophomore in college. So I'm sure those phone calls would have come my way,
100%.
And I don't know what I would have done because I can't answer that question, but the lure would have been there. It would have been really hard to probably say no. Even with the loyalty to Coach Taylor and to Ryder, I get it. I get it's really, really hard to do that. Now, as a coach, I can't stand it because I think from a mid-major perspective like Ryder, we work on building relationships with these kids like Ryder did for me and for you, and it's based off of starting as a freshman, seeing that growth happen, getting kids to be maximize their potential. And it's based on a friendship relationship type of basis. Whereas a Power 4 school, it's different. It's what have you done for me lately? Because it's so success driven,
Now, when you say Power 4, I never heard that before.
So that's like the SEC, that's like the Big 10, that's like the ACC, that's like the Big 12. It's those schools. It's like 30 or so schools. They
Penn State, Oklahoma State, Ohio State.
Yeah. Virginia Tech, NC State, you name the top 15 schools, 18 schools in the country are always Power 4 schools, with the exception of like Cornell and, things like that because they're Ivies. But those schools are the fully funded ones, and those are the ones that are driving the revenue generation and distribution piece of it for the athletes, because they have the money coming in from the TV rights that they have. I mean, why the hell do you think the Big Ten went after Maryland and Rutgers for football? Because they bring East Coast revenue into them. Same they did with UCLA and USC. They bring in West Coast revenue for the TVs. That's the reason they brought those teams in. So the Big Ten is now the Big 14. You know what I mean? But they're making money hand over foot for the conference and now the schools and now the athletes. But as a power or a mid-major coach, I hate it because
now what is that? What's
mid-majors like a Rider? It's like my conference, like the MAC. It's like Ohio. It's Kent State. It's schools that aren't those Power 4 schools, but they're just under. They're smaller schools. They're not funded as equally sometimes.
Would Lehigh fall into that?
Lehigh's a mid-major, yes, because they're not in a Power 4 school. But like Lock Haven is, some of those schools are Division II schools in some sports, but Division I in another sport. So that mid-majors, like in wrestling, there's, let's say 80 schools. 50 of them are mid-majors. 30 or so are Power 4. So they need us. They got to have somebody to beat up on at some point. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but the biggest thing is, so if I'm the head coach at Rider and I get a kid, like my 97-pounder was a redshirt freshman this year, wins the conference and beats the number 7 seed Big 12 champ first round at NCAAs. You damn well know people are knocking on the door and picking up the phone calling him. Illegally, I'm sure, and that I might not even be aware of. What benefit do I have of going and recruiting John Rittenhouse out of high school and developing him into an All-American as a sophomore and just to get him poached by a big Power 4 school when I could go get John Rittenhouse from Clarion, plug and play him, and he's an All-American for Rider, and now he's going to stick around because he's committed to the process a little bit. So it's changed the whole complexity. But back to my first comment, you can't fault the kids because they're going to get money thrown at them. They're going to take it, and they should take it, to be honest with you. They should. So it's really a challenge for me because I kind of go back and forth with it. And when a kid comes to me, I want to reach out across the desk and I want to shake him as hard as I can. But at the same time, I'm like, let me know if you need anything. Because I have to say that. It's the standard company answer. Let me know if you need anything.
You mean when a kid comes to you and says, hey, I'm thinking
about going in the portal.
Right.
And I'm like, well, I really wish you wouldn't. But if you think you can find a greener pasture, knock your socks off.
Is it strictly money?
It is 100%.
Okay. So the portal strictly money.
I think so. I had 3 kids that were graduating this year that had 1 year of eligibility left, and they're all jumped in the portal. They all got picked up by Virginia, Iowa State, and Arizona State.
Wow.
So that's why I don't like it. But if I was in their shoes, it's an opportunity. And if I can get money and give it to my family or take some pressure off of me financially, the lure is there. The lure is real.
It sounds to me, and I, again, I don't know enough about it. You know what I mean? I know little bits and pieces, and I always, I actually brought this up with Wade Chalice and Teague Moore.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And I say the same thing when I say, when we bring up NIL, it's part of what I've asked people, just because again, I'm curious everybody's opinion. Sure. And I say that, the NCAA started over here and now it's over here. And it seems like they skipped everything in between.
Yep.
That there's no, and I just wonder, based on what you're saying, like the Penn State, like the NFL, right?
Right.
Like what did the NFL do, when there was no salary cap, then they went to a salary cap. And I think that part of their collective bargaining agreement was that they kind of shared revenue on the bigger, like the New York market.
Yep.
the LA market. They're getting a lot of like revenue, to your point.
Yeah.
The TV, like Cleveland's not, what's Cleveland getting?
Nobody,
They're getting
nothing.
nothing.
Yeah.
So what's going to happen every year if you just like similar to the New York Yankees, George Steinbrenner, I'll just buy players and I'll do this. And you're up. The Yankees won the World Series again. Aren't they great? You know, but if you do, the way I see it, and if I hear you correctly, is if that power four, if they don't, if they've got these TV rights and all this money is being made, you're either going to have, you're going to end up with the haves.
Yep.
And everybody else is going to be a have not. And you're going to have, and I hate to bring this team up because again, nothing against them. And I think Kale's doing an amazing job,
Sure.
but you're going to have this guy sitting here and he's done a phenomenal job. And everybody can say, well, Ryder should do the same thing. Right?
Well, I wish it was that easy.
Right. That's my point. Like,
Yep.
hey, it helps when you're at a big university like that where people want to go regardless.
Yes. Yes.
Right out of the gate. They want to go to a Penn State.
Yep.
Because of the size of the university and everything it has to offer. So the Riders, the Lehighs, the smaller schools are at a disadvantage right out of the gate.
For sure.
Now you throw money into it. Now you're just layering, in my opinion, you're just now layering the disadvantage on top of it.
You're
and
100% right.
So I just wonder, and I'm just throwing this thought out there, is if, and I know that the NCAA, I guess, is kind of working on some stuff with that NIL. It's kind of the Wild West, it seems like,
it is
right
the Wild
now.
West right now.
And if they come in, I would love to see some level of, you know, if there's money, TV stuff, like spread it to the top 30 programs. So it's not just 4 programs. And I'm not saying spread it all to all the schools, because what are you going to get, a check for $5?
Yeah.
You know, if there's like 500 schools,
yeah.
You know what I mean? I'm saying if there's, you're a top 30 program, you're going to share in, and so it incentivizes those small, like we need to be top 30 because we're going to get a certain percentage of these and that's going to give us more money that we can keep kids or recruit kids and offer them money that, you know, again, a Penn State alumni, it's got to be a huge alumni to be bringing in big money. And so then the other piece I kind of thought of is like, okay, well, John Hangey's at Ryder. He's top 12 sophomore and I'm the head coach at Penn State. Man, I could use a 84 pounder, 97, whatever, 77, you know, I call you up, you enter the transfer portal, you come over, I give you this NIL money, blah, blah, blah. You win a national championship. And then Okie State says, hey, we'll give you double whatever they're giving you.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Boom. You enter the transfer. I say, you're allowed to enter that transfer portal one time and you go to one school
without penalty.
Yep. The next time you go into that portal, you're losing a year.
Yep. 100%.
So you put some sort that you can't go to 4 different schools in 4 years and collect 4 different paychecks. It's just because it's like bastardizing.
Yep.
The sport, like that NIL. And again, zero against the kids, by the way, 0.
Agreed.
But you got to put some level of, I don't want to say constraints, because I think it's
there's
wrong.
There's got to be parameters to it. There's got to be parameters to it. And it's like your football analogy is perfect. What balanced out football? So now you see different teams winning it almost every year. There's very few dynasties left anymore. That balance of the what do they call it? The salary cap. Balance the competition level.
Yep.
Right now, you're skewing the competition level like you described, because the haves are getting more, the have-nots are staying where they are.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to make sure that everybody feels a sense of competitiveness and fairness, and by doing that multi-transfer thing, because AJ Ferrari, he's on his 3rd school. He's been in school 3 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there's got to be some sort of penalty for that. But the reason why they don't give penalties for that anymore, because coaches used to be able to go for big contracts and leave after 2 years, and kids weren't allowed to do that. So they, like you said, they swung that pendulum all the way far to the student athlete side.
Right.
But now they have to come back in with parameters and structure because it's just being run like the Wild Wild West. You're 100% right, John.
Yeah, and the way I see it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's you now, you meaning Ryder and schools like Ryder are becoming basically a training center for bigger schools.
Yep.
Hey, Angie, go develop this kid that.
Yeah, so I don't have to.
What's that?
So that if I'm at a bigger school, I don't have to, and I can plug and play him, and then he becomes an All-American.
Well, I'm being facetious. They're not saying for you to do that. I'm just saying you're going to take a kid that maybe didn't win a state title. He took, which, and any kid that goes to states, I applaud. Not trying to say if you don't win a state title, but I'm saying you take a kid who, placed 8th or 7th or 6th or whatever, because the state champs, the Anthony Knoxes, the whatever, they're going to the Oklahoma States, the Penn States, the Iowas, on and on and on, right? So you get the guy that placed or didn't go to states or qualified for states. Then you take them and you develop him into a potential All-American or an All-American. And they're like, hey, thanks, coach.
That's exactly what it is. It's exactly what it is. And I get nothing in return for that. My program gets nothing in return.
I just see this road becoming what'd you call it? Mid-major.
Mid-major.
Okay. Yep. Every mid-major school is now a training center.
Yep.
For the power schools.
It's drifting in that direction. 100%. It's definitely drifting in that direction.
To me, it would be, in my opinion, a travesty if it just becomes, okay, is Penn State, Oklahoma State, or Iowa winning the national title this year?
Yep.
It's one of those three.
Where it's coming to. Yep.
And that would be god awful.
I think it's good that Oklahoma State's getting better because we need somebody to push Penn State. Because right now it's
100%.
But we need them to be competitive at the national tournament or in duels and say, okay, we don't know who's going to win it. Instead of Penn State's going to take first, who's going to take second? Nebraska, Oklahoma State, Iowa, Ohio State, NC State. Who's going to take second? Because it's never who's going to take first, who can beat Penn State. But we need that. But this isn't the process that's going to get that done. This is only going to make it worse.
And if you look back in the day, Arizona State, I think Minnesota one year, and they won 1 year and they didn't even have a national champ.
Yep.
They just had a bunch of guys.
10 All-Americans. Yeah.
Yeah. And they won a national title without a national champ.
Yep.
I don't think you're ever going to see Arizona State, Minnesota. Again, I put them below the top
tier.
Yeah. And it just, again, it's not about I think Cale has done an amazing job. I think Penn State's amazing. No two ways about it. He's an amazing coach.
Yep. I agree.
But when you throw money on top of that, like I said, there's got to be that's just my 2 cents. I think there's got to be some balance to that. Or
think about this, John. Here's another twist to that whole thought process. Let's say you're in the Big Ten as a coach. Let's say, you're the coach that comes in and takes 12th or 13th every year at the Big Ten, right? And you're doing a decent job, but you're getting your butt handed to you by the powers that be, right?
Yep.
Now they do this whole roster reduction on all sports, but increase scholarships. Where do you think they're going to get that scholarship extra money for the basketball and the football team? They're coming to the bottom feeders in the other conferences, like Olympic sports. Let's say you're the bottom level.
What's roster reduction? What was that you were talking about?
So this is the House settlement piece that hasn't been completely approved yet by the judge. They're saying they're going to reduce the maximum number of roster for wrestlers is 30 moving forward if they adopt this, which it looks like they're going to.
You can only have 30 kids on your.
Only 30.
You can't have 40 kids or 45.
Nope. You know how many I have on my roster next year? 42. Yeah.
And you got to cut to 30.
12 of them. No, because we're not opting in. 12 of them are incoming this year.
What is opting in? What is that?
So as a school, you have the Power Fours don't have a choice. They have to opt in. But schools like us, mid-majors, can either opt in or not opt in. But that gives you the revenue distribution or doesn't. So it's really confusing and really tricky, and it just adds a whole nother layer on top of the NIL stuff. So on top of NIL, where you can get paid as kids, the revenue distribution coming from the House settlement piece that's being ruled on is extra money that then you can distribute to your athletes at your school, and you have the discretion to who gets it. Well, if you have football, guess where that money's going? To the football kids. So right. Now let's keep going down a rabbit hole. So now Title IX becomes an issue because you're not going to give it to a women's soccer player over a football player. Right? Now you're getting Title IX into this whole thing, and now you're going to just generate so many more lawsuits, because who says that she's not as good, if not better, than that football player who's number 99 on the roster because he's just a body. He fills a spot on the roster.
What is the purpose behind the roster reduction?
There's reduction in our sport. Like football, it's going from 85 to 105.
They're going up.
They're going up. Other sports are getting.
You're being capped.
Yes. And here's the next
twist. Is there a reason behind that?
Well, they're going to take away scholarship limits too. So like right now we're at 9.9. So of 42 kids on a roster, I got to spread 9.9 out amongst who I think is worthy, right? The 30 becomes 30 full scholarships for me. But if you think Ryder can do another $1.8 million just to wrestling to get the 30 scholarships, you and I are both nuts.
Okay, so they're allowing you.
Yes.
You reduce it to 30, and they're allowing you to give 30 full rides.
If your school
but you need the money
yes.
to fund those 30.
And 1.8 million is just for my sport. That doesn't mention men's soccer, baseball, women's softball, women's soccer, lacrosse. It doesn't mention any of those other sports that are very successful at our place. But they would have to it would put Ryder out of business in a heartbeat. It's insane. Wow. And we're not alone in our efforts, because that's a very common position for most mid-majors. A lot of them are opting in and capping their roster, but they're not moving their scholarship budgets. I know for a fact Wisconsin in the Big Ten has to opt in. They're going to be capped at 30, and they got their scholarships cut from 9.9 to 5. So here it comes. If you don't start to produce as a Wisconsin in wrestling, they're going to take the rest of that money and give it to football.
And you're going to have to drop wrestling.
You're going to drop your sport. So that's the other danger behind the whole thing. So because football rules the roost with their revenue distribution. They get so much money through all their bowl games, all their TV coverage. I mean, there was one point this year, there was a football game on for like 4 months straight every day of the week. Whether it was college football, high school, it didn't matter. I mean, it was televised on TV for like 4 months straight. It's insane.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's
wrestling,
crazy.
The championships is like the third or fourth highest revenue generating championship in the NCAA.
Listen, I think they did a great job down there in Philly. I think,
right?
Yeah, I can't remember actually the last NCAA tournament I went to, and I went down there with Mannix, and I'm like, I thought it was my only complaint.
Mm-hmm.
My only complaint. And again, this is just me as an observer, and I'm like, how in God's green earth do I got guys falling into tables at the NCAA championships?
It's a great question, John, because there's not enough room. There's only 5 feet is the minimum from the circle to the table, and that's in the rule book. And there's sometimes the floor space, like Philadelphia's floor space was really tight. Like you noticed we couldn't walk behind once our matches were done with our athletes. We couldn't walk behind the scorers table. They had us on the 2 end mats. They had you walk in the middle and down the middle to get out because there was no room. So it was really tight. Like last year was the Kansas City, tons of room. So you didn't have it as much. The year before, Detroit was a bigger floor space. You didn't have it as much. So it really depends on the arena floor.
Where the venue is.
Yeah. So this
and maybe
one,
they just have to be honest, dude, like stick to the venues. And I hate to say this because Philly's right in our backyard and I thought it was awesome.
And it's the East Coast are going to flood that place, man.
Yeah.
But you need to find a bigger venue that has a floor space.
So do you have when it is on the East Coast, do you have a lot more people going and watching as opposed to if it's Midwest or?
It sells out. I think this was one of the highest attended, but it still sells out every year. So it's not going to change dramatically.
Gotcha.
It's New York City when it was at Madison Square Garden was in a phenomenal venue. It really was. But then you're in New York City and it's really hard to get around.
Right.
Take some of those Midwestern kids and plug them into the New York City atmosphere. They're like, where the hell are we?
Yeah. How's that floor space at Madison Square though? Plenty?
It was massive. Absolutely massive. Yeah. It was good. It was good.
So I again, I hate to say it, but then just if it's East Coast, it's Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Because this is a national championships and guys should not be falling into tables on a takedown, or not getting them calling it out of bounds on a takedown
because of danger
to win a national title. Right.
Yep.
Like, come on, dude. Like
we should be way beyond that. You're right. So now
that's just that's it. And then, the stall calls, but but I'm sure
next year it's at St. Louis. Next year it's at Cleveland. The year after that it's at St. Louis, which are both great venues. And the following years back at the Minnesota, if you remember when COVID canceled our season, we were supposed to be in the Minnesota Vikings football stadium. It's back there in 3 years.
Wow. Well, that's
so we'll have more than enough room at that point.
Yeah. If you got guys falling into tables there, then somebody needs to be fired.
Yeah, 100%.
Somebody needs to be fired.
Yeah.
Quick question. And this is, obviously went probably longer than I thought, but it's all good. It's good stuff. It's freaking good stuff. I think people are going to love this. Changes you'd like to see, and if any, like as far as rules or anything regarding, not NIL related, obviously, but the rules, like with a 3-point takedown, which I think's awesome. I think that was an awesome addition. I don't know how you feel, but
did you know that I was the chairman of the committee that made that rule go through?
Boom. See that?
I was the chairman of the rules committee when we approved that to be a 3-point takedown.
I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
Think it's awesome.
It's changed the sport in a really positive manner. And I think the proposal when we did it was the first takedown's 3 points, the rest were 2. And I said, first of all, it has to be all or none. And we did some math with it, in regards, like if you and I are wrestling a match and you take me down twice in the old rules and I got out twice and then I took you down and you got out, we'd be tied. Well, in theory, you should be winning because you took me down 2 more times, or at least twice as many times as I took you down.
Right.
Now in the new rules, you're winning by at least a point. You know what I mean? So you're rewarded for your efforts and your attempts to take me down.
No, I think it's to your point. It's like, I take you down offensively 3 times and I just boot you. You didn't even earn that escape. I just booted you.
Yep.
6-3.
Yeah.
It's still a tight match.
Yep.
And it shouldn't be
down
because
by accident, all of a sudden it's 6-5.
That's it.
And it's my choice. Second period, 6-6.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love the 3-point takedown. I think, no, I think it's you earned that, and Jack Kuvo would have had a lot quicker matches.
Well, it also increased our tech falls because they jumped because you can get to them quicker. Now that's one thing I think we should do is increase the amount to get to a tech fall because it's happening too quick now.
because you didn't change it.
Right. We did
You
not change the
changed
scoring.
this.
Yes.
You changed this, but you didn't
Yes.
change this. And
we didn't
I
have
agree.
enough historical data on that, but now they do. They can go back and compare it for the last 2 seasons and say, okay, a tech fall now has to be 18,
20, whatever.
something along that. Yeah, whatever they, decide. And I'm not saying that they will, but a major decision as well, because if I can get to 3 takedowns and 9 points right off the bat, man,
Yeah.
that's a quick major decision.
Yeah,
and
maybe
it
a
alters
tech
team
is
scores.
20 and a major's 12.
Yeah. Something
You know
along
what I
those
mean?
lines. Now, the one thing
Yeah.
I'm dead against, there's so many people want to push out rule in college wrestling. I'm dead
Like
against it.
freestyle.
Like if you step out of bounds, it's a point. The reason being is because I thought the old change of rules for the out of bounds with a supporting point in bounds dramatically improved the sport of wrestling. It gave it 5 feet more of activity. And some of the best wrestling happens on the edge right now.
Yep.
So if you make it a push out rule or a freestyle step out rule, it stops that action right away. And I don't think right now we're ready for that.
What you're going to do, because coaches will coach, and you correct me if I'm wrong, coaches will coach to the rules.
100%.
So guess what your drilling is going to be?
Yeah.
Sumo.
100%. Right now we have a drill.
You like watching sumo wrestling?
No, it's
maybe at 12 o'clock at night when there's nothing on.
Exactly. It's as boring as can be. But we have a drill, John, to your point. We have a drill that we do 5 minutes the day of weigh-ins that you start on the edge and you scramble. It's not live, but it's just, okay, you stay in bounds. Both guys stay in bounds, but you spar and you figure out how to use the cylinder to your advantage, use the, body, all that stuff, because you're coaching to the rule. You got to learn how to wrestle that edge.
Yeah.
And there's so much action that happens on that edge. I think you would make the sport go backwards if you did that.
Yeah. No, to me, it feels like a piece of sumo is coming into wrestling. And honestly, there's only one country that really enjoys sumo as far as I know.
And you're right. You're right.
And that's what, to lose a match on being pushed out of bounds to me would, I don't know. I just, I agree with you.
Yeah.
And obviously, and this is probably just, I don't know if this is ever going to be fixed, is the stalling, because you'll see stalling in one match and then you'll watch another match in the same tournament and it's called completely different. And that piece, I don't know if that can be overcome. And to your point, the edge stuff, I know that there's some people that want to try to get rid of the edge wrestling. And I like what you're saying too. Like some of the most exciting stuff is on the edge.
It is.
But then there's also the people that play the edge.
100%.
Like, hey,
there's always 2 sides to a coin.
Yep. Like, hey, I know where I'm at. And if I have to get out, I can get out.
And the
especially if I'm up,
done is predicated upon the official, because they're very well educated on. So like if I have a situation happen during one of my matches, I'll clip it and I'll send it to the secretary rules editor and be like, hey, what's your call on this? Just so that they know. And then what he'll do is he'll put clips out to the officials on a weekly basis and educate them. This was called incorrectly. This was called properly. Here's the mechanics for this. So there's an ongoing education, but some officials are better calling stalling. Some are not. Some let it go way too long. And that's boring to some of the non-diehards, you know what I mean, for the sport. So I think you're right. Stalling's always going to be a source of contention, because your definition might be slightly different than mine and the other next person, things like that. So it really all depends.
Well, the other piece too is, and God, who was the match in the finals where it was, I think it was a stalling call. Was it Ayala or
Ayala and
Ayala
and the Illinois kid? Yeah.
I think it was like a stall call. And I'm like, dude, just let him wrestle, man. And it's like, to me, the other piece of the stalling is like, you start seeing it like in the third period with a minute left. Like, whoa. What happened in the first period? I'm pretty sure they wrestled the same way.
Nothing's changed.
And you didn't hit it. There was no hits in the first period, but hey, now I hear a crowd yelling and I hear people booing, and all of a sudden, boom, and it's, I don't know. that's what I call like almost like match situational stalling.
Correct.
Where depending on where the match is, and sometimes, and I'm not suggesting that officials want to be part of the action,
but they do at times. It seems that way. John, if you remember back in the day, I remember this vividly. If you took a first step backwards when that whistle blew, you were getting dinged for stalling.
Yep.
That doesn't happen.
You had to go forward. Yeah.
You had to go forward.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. And I'm like, his first step has been backwards 3-4 times in a row. Like, I'll start saying that in a match.
Yeah.
Or I'm like, how about we just call regular stalling? That's regular stalling. He's backing up, playing the edge, like you had said earlier. Yep. And then he's wrestling and trying to make himself look good. That's regular stalling, but it's gamesmanship at the same time. I'm trying to game the official. That wrestler's trying to game my wrestler. The other coach is chirping back at the official. So it's all gamesmanship at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. I would like to see that. And I think it's probably impossible. I'm asking for like a unicorn down by a rainbow river. Is just if you don't know what who the official, what he even looked like, right, that's a good match.
Yeah,
that's a good match. If you don't even know, you can't remember what the official 100%, looked like.
100%.
And that's what I'd like to see is like Ayala. I would have liked to seen him. And again, other people could look at it and go, well, he kind of was. And me and my son were chirping at each other. He was like saying, well, Daddy kind of, I'm like, it's a national championship final.
Let them decide it themselves.
Unless it's blatant, man, let the kids wrestle. Let 100%. Them decide.
Yep.
I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
And that's why the rules are in place,
Yeah.
I had a wrestler, Ryan Wolf, who was an All-American for us. He used to get so mad when people used to stall against him, right?
Yeah.
I go, Ryan, and he used to yell at the referees all the time. I go, you cannot yell at the referees because
while he's wrestling.
Yeah, because he gets so mad. I go, first of all, it's in the rule book. He's allowed to stall. It's on the official to call him for stalling. You know? I said, so you got to stop yelling. He used to get so worked up and like out of his, I'm like, dude, just keep doing your thing. Let the referee take care of it. But that's an extreme example because there are times where you see it and it's like, oh my God, that's stalling. And it doesn't get called. And then there's like, what are you calling? That's not stalling. He's been wrestling. So you get both ends of the spectrum. So
yeah, I get it.
But our officials have gotten exponentially better with the education component that's there, the testing process that's there, the video review process that's involved. So I think it's gotten exponentially better than when we wrestled.
I love the bricks. I love the bricks. And you had your 5 minutes of fame this national tournament,
on the cell phone.
And it was freaking awesome, dude. I was laughing. I thought it was awesome. And then the kid pulls it out in the end. That even made it better.
That even made it better.
It was super cool.
I appreciate
But listen, brother, we went way over the time, but it was awesome.
And this is like catching up, my man.
I appreciate you as always. And mid-May, we're going to come visit you over there at Ryder Campus. I haven't seen it forever. So I'm excited just to come over and see you in feeling good too, walking around, brother.
Maddox around. He's going to love it too.
Awesome. Love you, buddy. Take care, man.
Love you too, man.
Hey,
having me on.
One quick thing. Tell my man JP to start studying now for fantasy football.
Okay. I love it. I absolutely love it.
All right, brother.
Talk to you soon, John.
All right, buddy. See you, man.
Music licensing reimagined.